Certainly the first two that I can endorse wholeheartedly. The Constitution is a good guideline, and if it isn't libertarian enough for us, we should change it according to the rules. Victimless crimes, I think that telling people how to act on a personal level as long as they don't hurt other people is a good idea, and it would certainly eliminate about 50 or 60% of those who are in prison today, because I think the laws against victimless crimes is what produces that. I'm not for taxes, though. I mean, if we're going to have a libertarian society, we want to reduce taxes. We sure don't want to raise taxes on the American people. The market will take care of it. I want cheap oil. I want the best price, and that's why I want a free market. And the other thing, a demilitarized zone, you'd get that, but you don't need to have any international agreements. You don't have to do any contracts. You just have to have an open, free, libertarian society. Let all our enemies know exactly what we have. Let them know where our weapons are. Let them know how we can defend this country. But more importantly, let them know that the American people understand and believe in liberty, and they're not going to put up with anybody taking away. Under those circumstances, our greatest threat is probably here in Washington, D.C., rather than from the Soviet Union or some Saddam Hussein. I mean, that's not really our threat. Our threat is here at home. So we don't need to have verifiable treaties. We would have a lot less weapons. And the Soviet Union, they couldn't even feed themselves, so why do we have to worry about where their weapons are? They're out trying to get a $12 billion bailout from the West from the IMF. So what we need is vigilance, and we need to cut off all that, but we don't need any more taxes.
Greenville, South Carolina, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Paul, I'd like to know first if you're running for office again in the next election, and if so, I'd like you to know that you've got my vote. And a while ago, you made a statement saying about how people going out and killing or committing crimes, let's say, to get a hold of hemp. I disagree with that. I think there are more people going out committing crimes for the harder substances.
Probably so.
And I think we'd do a lot better if we treat alcohol and hemp in the same light.
Well, I'm for taking care of all drugs the same way. Alcohol and cigarettes are big killers, so we should treat all the other drugs the same way. I mean, they're the hard drugs, and yet they're legal. Governments sell alcohol frequently, and they certainly subsidize tobacco. So I would say we should treat them all the same. That is, turn them over to the free market, let people make their own decisions about whether they want to smoke and drink, and also whether they want to use hard drugs. There's not that many people who do use hard drugs. For the amount of crime we have in this country, it really comes from the fact that these laws are not very wise. As far as running for office, I have no immediate plans for running for office. Possibly someday that may occur, but I'm still resting from last time.
Dr. Paul, do you and the Libertarian Party have a position on the nomination of Judge Souter for the Supreme Court?
No, I don't think the party has made a statement on that, and I personally would feel like a lot of other people probably wouldn't know enough about him to say, would he be a good judge, would he have libertarian leanings or not. I haven't heard any real negatives to say that he is anti-libertarian, but I really haven't studied it enough. But I would think it's very unlikely that we would take a position on that.
What would you look for in a Supreme Court justice?
Of course, somebody that would understand what freedom is all about, what rights mean, that individuals have rights but groups don't have rights, and that understands the Constitution and would rule on law and say, look, this is either constitutional or it isn't, and not to rewrite law in their court rulings. And then if certain laws were not constitutional and we need to changes, let the legislature and the people change them.
Ron Paul is our guest, in case you've just joined us. He is the former member of Congress who was also the Libertarian candidate for president in 1988. We still have time to get your call in if you have a question. Let's go to Washington, D.C. Go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Maddox, and hi, Dr. Paul.
Hi.
I wanted to know about you're turning into a libertarian as we speak. I guess I was one and just didn't know what to call it.
Probably natural.
I'd like to know about your views on the perpetuation of the two-party system in this country, and how we can get out of it and make it a real multi-party system where everybody has a chance at being elected, not just Democrats or Republicans.
I'll tell you what, we're dangerously close to not having a chance to change that, and we really don't have a two-party system. If you come around to understanding and accepting the basic premise of the libertarian position, you will accept the the idea that really the two parties are the same. You know, you can work for and encourage a man like Ronald Reagan to run for office because he wants less government, he wants to spend less money, he wants less taxes, he wants to balance the budget. And I was one of those individuals. In the 70s, I encouraged and did what I could to encourage Ronald Reagan. But what happened? He spent like a liberal Democrat did. So policies don't change. I mean, whether you would have had a lot of people said, well, I wanted to vote for you, Ron, last time, but I had to vote against Dukakis. The truth is, actually, there would be no difference. Policies are the same. Both administrations on the back, in behind the scenes, it's either a Kissinger or a Brzezinski, and it's either for some welfare of this type, or welfare for the poor, or welfare for the rich, or welfare for the foreigners. Very rarely do you have this opportunity. The laws are biased against us. It's so hard to get on the balance. We spent, you know, in 1988, I raised over $1 million. Half my money had to go to just trying to get on the ballots. But that's design. Who writes all the laws? Who makes it difficult? The Republicans and the Democrats. And C-SPAN was great for the Libertarians. They at least allowed us to come on and explain our views, and it was very, very generous. But do you think the three majors were concerned? I mean, do you think there's an opposition among the three major networks today presenting a more libertarian, pro-American viewpoint in the Middle East? No, we don't hear that. So we're dangerously close to having a very, very closed society, a one-party system, and the American people really haven't had a choice. The only choice the American people have right now is not to vote when they get sick of it all. And if you take our vote, the Libertarian vote, and those who are sick of it all, we're the large majority. Only about 48% of the people voted last time.
Dr. Paul, how can people contact the Libertarian Party if they're interested? Well,
the best thing to do is, you know, to call our 800 number. We have an 800 number. It's very easy to call. It's 682-1776, and we would be very glad to send information about the Libertarian Party or any particular issue that we haven't been able to cover. It's 682-1776, an 800 number.
Oceanside, California, go ahead.
Yes, I was under this understanding that taxes under the Constitution were supposed to be collected in gold from states, and the income tax was never really ratified. Every year at the end of session, they vote again an emergency act to keep it in action. And I've heard lots of different views on this C-SPAN, and I was just wondering if there's any kind of anarchist representation involved here. I'll just let you talk on this.
An anarchist representation with the Libertarians? I wonder if that's what he meant.
Paul, are you going?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Do you mean anarchists with the Libertarians?
No, not necessarily. I know some of the views are probably some of the, similar, but as far as like peaceful anarchists go. But
yeah. Well, on the taxes, the Constitution, as I understand it, meant that the states would be, they would be required to pay a certain proportion to the government, the federal government, to run it. That changed in 1913, and there is this debate and even books written on the fact that technically it wasn't properly ratified. I think it's an academic point and not a legal point, because can you imagine a court today ruling tomorrow, that the income tax is illegal? Even if it is illegal, well, we all know it's immoral and it's a bad idea. But it's the establishment, the politicians especially, the people, they're not going to do it that way. So I think it's an academic discussion on whether or not they really ratified the Constitution, the 13th, the income tax as properly, as it should have been done properly.
St. Peter, Minnesota, go ahead.
Yes, good evening, gentlemen. I have a question for you, Mr. Paul, with regard to how you feel about the armed services. You say that we should not be in the Middle East. Since we are, I'd like to know if you do support the men and women who are serving there on our behalf. And also, I would like to know, you say that we should not have gone over to Iraq and that we should have completely ignored the situation. What about the Americans who are there, Americans that are being held hostage? These are our neighbors and friends. And how do you feel about the armed services? Okay. How would you say the Libertarian Party feels as far as protecting our nation?
Well, I think we should protect our nation, but we as libertarians believe that we expose our nation much more so by going over there, that men are going to be killed. We've had 16 men or so killed already by accidents, and they wouldn't have to die. Marines died in the Beirut barracks. So I would say that we have the greatest concern for the soldier. I served 5 years in the military, and I know something about being in the military. But I think exposing them to needless and useless situations is the least concern about the American people. I mean, here we have a president asking these kids to go over there. They're talking about the draft. They call up the reserve. They disrupt thousands of lives, and he has to prove he's unconcerned and keeps playing his golf and going fishing. I mean, that should be enough to annoy every American person.
Rochester, New York. Thanks for waiting. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm been a long-standing supporter of the Libertarian Party. I'm really glad they're around. They give me a lot of spiritual uplifting. What I'd like to say, although I'm in favor of the party's position of military isolationism, I wonder if you'd give any credibility to the point that if Hussein acquired Kuwait and then acquired Saudi Arabia, that this would be great control over what is economically viable, the oil specifically, and that would be a threat to our society.
I don't see it as a threat. The Arab nations got together in the 1970s and they were unified. They're all a bunch of dictators over there, and they got together and they rigged the price of oil, and they got away with it mainly because we had regulation of prices here. The best attack against Arabs doing anything to us in the oil price is deregulation, and we already have that. Now you say, what would have happened if they went into Saudi Arabia? Let's say that he did and he took Saudi Arabia. Well, you know who might just take care of him then? Maybe Israel will. I mean, Israel has something at stake here, and Israel might have to defend themselves and take care of it, but it's not our business to defend these sheiks and these kings and these dictators and these violators of civil liberties and these guys that rig oil prices, these people who are in partnerships with our big oil companies. The American people are outraged the fact that they're going and paying 25 and 30 cents per gallon. At the same sense, they're supporting the whole notion that they're going to send their kids and their money to support the same people they think they should, that they're angry at.
Greenwood Village, Colorado. You're the last caller. Go ahead.
This question I've got for Dr. Paul. In fact, first of all, I'd like to tell you that I agree with most of the things you say. But a question on Middle East I have. If you are primarily against sending troops out there because Saddam Hussein attacked Kuwait, where would you draw the line to stop a man? Would you draw the line after he attacks, say, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates? Where would
I would draw the line when he starts to attack the United States, because I have no authority. If I were still in Congress, I would listen to the Constitution and pay attention to it, and I would say, I, as a congressman who swore to uphold the Constitution, I have no authority to take young people and American people's taxpayers and go and stop some madman halfway around the world, because that's making the thing much worse. So no, I would not draw the line there. I would draw it back here for our national security. I don't want to endorse a system and a program and a policy that literally increases a threat to our national security. Now we're truly threatened, and that's mainly the reason the oil price has skyrocketed.
I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you.
We've been visiting with Ron Paul, who was the presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party in 1988. Thank you for your phone calls, and stay tuned for our next discussion.
Join C-SPAN.
That concludes this discussion with Ron Paul, 1988 Libertarian Party candidate for president. Here's a reminder now that the United States House of Representatives will reconvene here in Washington this Wednesday following the traditional summer recess. And that means our long-standing commitment to bring you live gavel-to-gavel coverage of House proceedings will also continue. So join us Wednesday for live gavel-to-gavel coverage of the United States House of Representatives, beginning at noon Eastern Time, 9 a.m. for our West Coast viewers. And coming up next, it's a look at the federalism, rule of law, separation of powers in the U.S. and the Soviet Union.